My sister looked me in the eye on Christmas Eve and said, "This holiday isn't for losers." That was the moment I realized I wasn't family anymore, just their wallet. My name is Danielle Claiborne, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the dependable one. The sister who covered the missing check, the daughter who stepped in when bills came up short, the one who made sure Christmas looked perfect even when no one else lifted a finger. I thought that's what family meant, showing up, even when it cost you. That night, I sat at the long wooden table in my mother's dining room. The place smelled of pine and cinnamon, with candles flickering against the walls. My sister Miranda wore her usual smug smile, dressed to impress in a red velvet dress, gold earrings catching the light. My brother Caleb sat beside her, already halfway through his second glass of wine, laughing at whatever joke had been tossed across the table. I had brought the wine, the ham, the pies, even the little gifts under the tree. I never complained about it before. I thought it mattered, that keeping the traditions alive meant something. But when Miranda leaned back in her chair, tilted her glass, and tossed those words out, it felt like the air in the room turned sharp. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. At first, I thought I misheard her. But then she smirked and looked around the table, as if expecting applause. Caleb chuckled, shaking his head, like he agreed. My mother, Ruth, didn't scold her or even frown. She actually laughed, a low, knowing laugh that twisted in my stomach like a knife. Heat rushed to my face, but I forced a smile. No one defended me. No one said, "That was uncalled for." They didn't even seem surprised. To them, it was just another jab at me, the single sister with no husband, no kids, and apparently no worth beyond what I could buy. I tried to keep my voice steady as I cut into my food, but my hands shook. Every bite tasted like ashes. Around me, the conversation rolled on as if nothing had happened. Caleb bragged about a deal he'd closed. Ruth fussed about the stuffing. Miranda leaned back, satisfied, like she'd just proven a point. In that moment, I didn't feel like their daughter or their sister. I felt like an outsider who had paid for her own seat at the table. The room felt smaller, colder, no matter how many candles burned. I wanted to leave, to walk out into the winter night and never look back. But I didn't. I sat there, silent, swallowing my shame with every bite. I knew something had shifted inside me. I couldn't pretend anymore. That Christmas was the night I realized they didn't see me as family. They saw me as the wallet they could laugh at when it suited them. And I knew I couldn't let it stay that way. Looking back, I can see that Christmas wasn't the first time they treated me that way. It had been happening for years. I had always been the one to step in, the one who carried the weight when everyone else fell short. At the time, I thought I was helping, but now I know they were only using me. When Miranda went off to college, she was given a decent allowance by our mom. She burned through it on clothes, nights out, and trips she didn't need to take. I remember the call clearly, her voice all sweet and desperate, telling me she couldn't buy her textbooks and would fail her classes without them. I transferred the money without hesitation, even though I had to stretch my own budget thin to make it happen. She promised she'd pay me back, but the subject never came up again. If I reminded her, she'd laugh and say, "Oh, come on, Danny, you know you've got it covered." Caleb was no different. He called me late one night after getting pulled over for drunk driving. His voice was shaking, and he said he needed money for a lawyer right away. I could hear the fear in him, and I thought if I didn't help, he'd ruin his future. So I paid. I wrote the check without telling a soul how much it hurt to see my savings disappear. Caleb never even thanked me properly. He brushed it off later, saying, "You're the reliable one. You always fix things." As if that was my role, not a choice. And then there was Mom. Ruth had a way of acting like she was helpless when it came to bills. One month she'd say she forgot about rent. Another time it was the electricity bill. She'd sigh, saying she hated to ask but didn't know what else to do. I would go to the grocery store and fill up a cart for her so she wouldn't have to worry. At first, it made me feel good, like I was keeping the family together. But after a while, I noticed something. She wasn't embarrassed, not even a little. She expected it. She'd smile as I set the bags down and say, "What would we do without you, Danielle?" But it never sounded like gratitude. It sounded like a script she'd been reciting for years. I told myself I did all of this out of love. I thought family was supposed to be about sacrifice. But when I really stop and think about it, I don't remember a single time they did the same for me. They didn't offer when I struggled with rent after my old car broke down. They didn't step up when I worked 2 jobs just to stay afloat. All they saw was someone they could lean on, someone who would always say yes. That's the part that hurts the most. It wasn't kindness they saw in me, it was obligation. They didn't appreciate the help. They expected it. And that's when I realized love shouldn't feel like a debt I could never pay off. The night carried on, and soon the plates were cleared away. Laughter and chatter filled the room as the server dropped the check on the end of the table. Everyone's eyes slid toward me like it was already decided. No one even pretended to reach for their wallet. My mother leaned back with a satisfied look, like this was the natural order of things. Caleb tapped the table with his glass and said, "You've got this, right, Danny? You make more than the rest of us combined." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Miranda gave a little laugh, swirling the last of her wine. "Come on, Danielle. You don't have a husband, no kids, no real life to pay for. At least you can pick up the bill. That's your contribution." She said it so casually, like it was just a fact about me, not an insult. But it landed like a knife in my chest. I stared down at the leather folder sitting in the middle of the table. The number inside was more than I wanted to think about. My cheeks burned, and I could feel the tightness in my throat. I waited for anyone, to step in and say it wasn't fair, that maybe this time they could split it. But the silence told me everything. No one was going to step in. They were waiting for me to do what I always did. My first instinct was to argue, to point out that Miranda had spent money on her dress, that Caleb always seemed to have cash for beer and football bets, that Mom had a way of buying decorations while forgetting bills. The words almost slipped out. But then I stopped. I lifted my head, forced a smile, and nodded. "Sure," I said softly. I pulled out my card and set it down. My voice didn't shake, my hand didn't tremble. On the outside, I looked calm, almost agreeable. But inside, something shifted. The sting of Miranda's words burned deeper than before, and for the first time, I didn't just feel embarrassed, I felt done. Completely done. I let them laugh and talk as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't just bought my way into their good graces again. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I let the moment play out exactly the way they wanted. But under that quiet smile, I made a promise to myself. This would be the last time they used me. The last time I carried the weight while they sat back and enjoyed the show. They didn't know it yet, but Christmas dinner had just changed everything. After Christmas, I decided I was done. I didn't make any big announcement, I didn't warn anyone, I just stopped being their safety net. At first, it felt strange, almost like breaking a habit I'd carried for years. But soon enough, the tests began. Miranda was the first to come calling. She phoned me one evening, her tone sharp and impatient. "Danny, I need your help," she said. "The furnace is broken, and the repair guy needs half the money up front. You know I can't cover that right now." I took a deep breath and answered slowly. "I can't help you with that." There was a pause on the other end, like she didn't understand. "What do you mean you can't? This is an emergency. You've always helped before." "I know," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But not this time." Her voice rose, full of disbelief. "Are you serious? You're really going to let me freeze in my own house?" "You'll figure it out, Miranda," I replied and ended the call before she could say more. My hands shook afterward, not from guilt, but from the shock of finally saying no. A week later, Caleb showed up at my door. He looked worn out, his jacket unzipped, his eyes darting around the room like he couldn't sit still. He finally blurted it out. "Look, Danny, I maxed out my credit cards. I'm drowning here. Just spot me a few thousand. I'll pay you back, I promise." I studied his face, remembering all the other promises he'd made before. "I can't do that, Caleb," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. "You're really going to hang me out to dry? You've got money sitting there, and you can't help your own brother?" "I'm not your bank," I told him. "You'll have to handle it." He swore under his breath, stormed out, and slammed the door. I stood there in the silence of my living room, my chest tight, but at the same time lighter than it had been in years. Then came Mom. Ruth didn't come angry, she came heavy with guilt. She sat at my kitchen table, folding and unfolding a napkin in her hands. "Danielle, this family has always leaned on each other," she began. "That's what we do. We take care of each other. You've been blessed, and it's your duty to share that blessing." I met her eyes. For once, I didn't shrink under the weight of her words. "You're right," I said evenly. "Family does take care of each other. It's time you all take care of each other now." The napkin slipped from her fingers. She stared at me like I'd just spoken in another language. But I didn't waver. The line had been drawn, and I wasn't stepping back over it. It didn't take long for the storm to hit. At first, there was silence, the kind that almost fooled me into thinking they'd accepted my decision. But then the calls started, sharper and louder than ever. Miranda's voice came first, dripping with anger. You've changed, Danielle. You're selfish. Bitter. Always playing the victim. Do you even hear yourself? Acting like you're some saint who's been wronged, when all you've done is throw money around. That doesn't make you special, it just makes you pathetic. She didn't even let me answer before hanging up, leaving me staring at the phone in disbelief. Not long after, Caleb showed up again. He didn't come with excuses this time. He came with rage. He shoved the door open, his face red and his words already flying. You think you're better than us now? You think cutting us off makes you strong? No, it makes you a traitor. You're abandoning your own family, Danielle. Who does that? What kind of person turns their back on blood? I tried to stay calm, but his words stung. He cursed at me, called me cold and heartless, said I'd regret it when no one came to my aid. Then he slammed the door so hard the frame rattled, leaving me in a house that suddenly felt too quiet. But it was my mother's words that cut the deepest. She came to me one evening, her face drawn and tired, but her eyes hard as stone. She sat across from me, folded her hands, and said in a low voice, "You're not a real daughter anymore if you can't give back to the family." I froze. Out of everything they'd said, that was the line that broke something in me. Not a real daughter. As if all the years of helping, all the sacrifices, all the times I'd pulled them out of the fire meant nothing. My worth to her had never been about love. It had been about what I could provide. I wanted to argue, to shout, to remind her of the nights I stayed up worrying about them, the bills I paid without hesitation, the times I put them before myself. But the words stuck in my throat, because deep down I knew the truth. None of that had mattered. They didn't see me as Danielle, the daughter or the sister. They saw me as the wallet, the safety net, the fixer. Without that role, I was disposable. The realization was cold and sharp, but it also cleared everything for me. They had never truly loved me, not in the way family should. They loved the comfort I provided, the ease I brought them, the way I carried their weight so they wouldn't have to. And now that I refused, they couldn't see me as anything else. A few weeks passed in uneasy quiet. I kept to myself, thinking maybe the worst of it was over. I didn't hear much from my family, and for a short time I let myself believe the storm had blown past. But then a friend of mine, Evelyn, pulled me aside after church. Her voice was soft, careful, like she didn't want to hurt me. "Danielle," she said, "I think you should know what's being said about you." My stomach tightened. "By who?" I asked, though I already knew. She hesitated, then sighed. "Your family. Word's been going around." The ground seemed to tilt under me as she explained. Miranda had told cousins that I was stingy, that I had plenty of money but refused to help, because I enjoyed watching others struggle. Caleb had told people I was unstable, that I was having some kind of breakdown and couldn't be trusted. Worst of all, Mom had whispered to relatives that I was jealous of Miranda's success, that I couldn't stand seeing her with a family of her own. Each word was like a fresh cut. Stingy. Unstable. Jealous. None of it was true, but it spread like fire all the same. I could picture their smirks as they twisted the story, turning me from the dependable daughter into the selfish villain. For a moment, I felt my chest burn with rage. My hands curled into fists, and I wanted nothing more than to march over and scream the truth in their faces. How dare they? After everything I had done for them, after every sacrifice, this was how they repaid me, by destroying my name to anyone who would listen. But instead of exploding, I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay calm. Yelling would only prove their lies. Fighting back would give them more fuel. They wanted me rattled, broken, chasing their approval like I always had. No, not this time. I realized something then. I didn't need to defend myself to people who believed gossip over my character. Anyone who truly knew me would see through the lies. And anyone who didn't wasn't worth chasing. My family thought they had the upper hand, that by cutting me down in public they could shame me into crawling back. But what they didn't understand was that I wasn't planning to crawl anywhere. I was planning to stand taller than ever. That night, sitting alone in my quiet house, I decided my revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be a fight or a dramatic scene. It would be patient, deliberate, and final. I would let them choke on their own bitterness while I built something stronger for myself. They wanted me weak. They wanted me desperate. Instead, I was going to show them what life looked like when I stopped carrying them. That would be my answer, my quiet revenge, the one they would never see coming until it was too late. I stopped picking up their calls. If they wanted to talk, they could send a message, And even then, I answered only when I felt like it. One by one, I made it clear in writing. No loans, no handouts, no payments, no exceptions. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't argue. I simply wrote, I won't be giving money anymore. Please don't ask. It was short and final, and for the first time in my life, I set a boundary I had no intention of crossing. Not long after, Miranda's birthday came around. She always made a big deal out of it, and in the past, I had been the one to cover most of the cost. Last year I paid for the venue and the catering because she swore it was her special day, and she deserved the best. This year, she sent me a glittery invitation with a handwritten note at the bottom. Bring your card, we'll settle the bill after. I stared at it for a long moment before tearing it in half. When she called, I didn't even bother making excuses. I won't be coming, I told her simply. She went silent, then laughed like I was joking. But when she realized I meant it, her voice turned sharp. You're unbelievable, Danielle. Everyone will notice you're not there. Do you want to embarrass me? I don't care what they notice, I said and ended the call. It felt good, cleaner than I expected. Meanwhile, my own life was moving forward. At work, months of effort finally paid off when I was offered a promotion. It came with better pay, more respect, and a sense of pride I hadn't felt in years. I celebrated quietly by myself, treating it as something I had earned without needing anyone's approval. A few weeks later, I bought my own home, a place that was mine alone. No strings, no debts, no one else's name on it. I didn't tell my family. They found out through neighbors and distant relatives. Word spread quickly, and soon I was hearing through others that they were shocked I hadn't invited them to see the house or celebrate the promotion. Caleb apparently ranted about how cold I'd become. Miranda called me arrogant for not showing off the way she thought I should. Mom, of course, complained that I was keeping secrets from my own blood. But beneath their words, I knew what they were really feeling. The sting of my absence, the weight of my silence, and most of all, the missing money that used to flow so freely from me to them. Without me funding their parties, their debts, their bills, things weren't so easy anymore. And that was exactly what I wanted. I didn't need to raise a hand or shout. My absence alone was enough to remind them of how much they had taken for granted. The seeds were planted, and I was content to let them grow. It didn't take long before the cracks started to show. Without me filling the gaps, their lives began to wobble. I didn't have to be there to see it. I heard it through the grapevine, whispered by neighbors, passed along by mutual friends who thought I should know. Miranda was the first one to slip. She had always lived beyond her means, buying expensive clothes, taking little trips, and charging dinners to her cards without thinking twice. Now, without me to cover her shortfalls, the bills piled up. A neighbor mentioned she was late on her mortgage payment and that the credit card companies were calling nonstop. She tried to hide it by posting a confident face in public, but word spread that her cards were maxed out and she was juggling overdue notices. The thought of her scowling at a stack of unpaid bills almost made me smile. Caleb wasn't doing much better. He loved his truck, a shiny pickup he bragged about more than anything. But trucks don't stay shiny when the bank comes calling. One of his buddies told me he was behind on payments and the repo man had already been circling. Caleb had spent years leaning on me to save him from his messes, but now he had no one to bail him out. I pictured him watching from the window as the tow truck rolled up, powerless to stop it, and I felt nothing but relief. And then there was Mom. Ruth had always been quick to tell me it was my duty to help, her voice thick with guilt whenever I hesitated. Family takes care of each other, she'd say, though she meant me taking care of them. Without me to lean on, her mask cracked. She fell behind on rent, and instead of turning to me, she started going to church members for handouts. I heard she was walking from pew to pew, telling her story, hoping someone would take pity. Some helped at first, but even pity wears thin when it becomes a routine. When I heard all of this, I didn't rush to fix it. I didn't open my wallet or step in to smooth things over. I listened, nodded, and carried on with my life. For the first time, their chaos wasn't mine to solve. Their problems stayed firmly on their side of the fence, where they belonged. And for the first time in years, I felt light. Free. Vindicated. Every late bill, every lost dollar, every struggle they now faced was proof that I had never been the problem. They had built their lives on my back, and without me to carry them, everything came crashing down. I didn't need to say a word. Their downfall spoke louder than anything I could have shouted. And as I watched from a distance, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Thanksgiving came around the next year, and for the first time in months, I got a message from Mom. Her words were syrupy sweet, full of guilt and pleading. She said the family missed me, that the holiday wouldn't feel the same without everyone together. She wrote about reconnecting and forgiving, as if the past could be swept under the rug. I stared at the invitation for a long time before deciding to go. But this time I went differently. I didn't spend hours in the kitchen making pies or casseroles. I didn't stop at the store for wine or groceries. I didn't tuck my credit card in my pocket to cover the bill. I walked in with nothing but myself. The house looked the same as always. Warm lights in the windows, the smell of turkey drifting through the air. For a moment, stepping inside felt almost familiar. But the faces that turned toward me told the real story. Miranda's eyes narrowed, Caleb barely looked up, and Mom plastered on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dinner started stiff, the table crowded with food that wasn't mine this time. Conversation bounced awkwardly around, and I could feel the unspoken tension pressing down on all of us. It didn't take long before Miranda broke the silence. She leaned back in her chair, her fork tapping the edge of her plate. "So, Danielle," she said with a tight smile, "since you've been doing so well, maybe you could help me out with my mortgage. Things have been rough, and family's supposed to step up, right?" The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. My heart pounded, but my face stayed calm. I set my fork down and looked her straight in the eye. "Last year," I said evenly, "you told me Christmas was no place for losers. I guess you were right, because the losers at this table lost me." The room went silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Caleb stared at me like he couldn't believe what I'd said. Miranda's face flushed deep red, her lips parting but no words coming out. Mom's smile vanished, and for once she had nothing to add. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. No one dared to laugh it off this time. No one had a comeback ready. My words landed harder than any money I had ever given them. I picked up my napkin, laid it neatly beside my plate, and stood. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't argue. I simply left them sitting there, staring at the empty spot where my wallet used to be. And for the first time at that table, I felt completely in control. I walked out of that dining room without looking back. The air outside was cold and sharp, but it felt cleaner than the stale silence I had left behind. Behind me, the house that once held every holiday memory stood quiet. No one followed. No one tried to stop me. They just sat there, stunned, realizing their grip on me had finally slipped for good. From that night forward, I didn't answer when the phone rang with their numbers. I didn't open the door when they showed up unannounced. I didn't reply to the messages filled with guilt or the letters trying to shame me into coming back. My wallet was no longer theirs to control, and I had no reason to explain myself. Life slowly began to shift. Without their constant demands, my days felt lighter. My money went toward things that truly mattered. Fixing up my home, traveling to places I had always wanted to see, and treating myself in ways I had never allowed before. The stress that used to cling to me, the dread of the next request, was gone. I started to build connections with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give. Friends who invited me to dinner and insisted on splitting the check. Neighbors who offered a hand without expecting anything in return. Co-workers who celebrated my wins without resentment. Bit by bit, I formed a circle that felt more like family than the one I had been born into. There were moments when I thought about the past, holidays spent at that table, the years I had poured myself into holding everyone else up. But instead of regret, I felt clarity. I saw it for what it was, a one-sided arrangement where love was measured in dollars and appreciation vanished the second I stopped paying. My family tried now and then to pull me back in. A message about someone being sick, a voicemail about overdue bills, even a letter from my mother written in shaky handwriting about how a real daughter wouldn't turn away. I read them, set them aside, and carried on. Their words had no power anymore. I had finally learned that family isn't about who demands the most from you. It's about who stands with you, even when you have nothing to give. And I wasn't going to let myself be drained dry again. My sister once said Christmas was no place for losers. She was right. I'm no loser, and I finally stopped paying for the ones who are.